And so it was a very menacing thing. And my blood froze like when I uncovered this. I was like, oh my.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Chatter, a podcast from The Gist, with me, Josh Hamilton. This might be the most insane episode I have done to date. My guest today asked to remain anonymous, so I'll just refer to him as James N. During some research I've been doing about psychological and information warfare, I came across the term cyber torture. Cyber torture is a pretty vast term, but one example is the harassment experienced by Julian Assange whilst he was in the Ecuadorian embassy. There is ongoing research and investigation being conducted on this topic, including work done by Nils Melzer in coordination with the UN. And there are thousands and thousands of reported cases of individuals experiencing organised harassment and targeting. Whether you choose to believe James or not in his own story, there are thousands of studied and documented cases of cyber torture and organised harassment. And if you don't believe that, you can check out the list of sources and studies that I've added in the description below. If you haven't already and you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast and to our mailing list. And don't forget, my book, Brexit, The Establishment Civil War, is now available for pre-order on Amazon. You'll find the link in the description below. So, here's James. You're ready to go? Okay, so mics are on. We are live. James, welcome to the show. It's very cool to have you chatting to me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Not a problem. So we're here to talk about cyber torture. So why don't you give people an idea of how would you even define it? Because I don't know, the term brings to mind so many different possibilities for what it could mean. So, why don't you start by laying out what it is?
So cyber torture is a term that Nils Melzer, who is the special rapporteur for torture at the UN, has coined, and he has been using it. And it's a type of umbrella term that refers to just a whole bunch of different types of harassments. So it's definitely an umbrella term, and there are some misconceptions on what cyber torture is exactly, because it can include lots of things. So it can include electronic harassment, which generally involves advanced technologies that can effectively torture you through like microwaves, radio waves. There's acoustic weapons. So kind of advanced weaponry that isn't very well known today. So that's part of electronic harassment. There's also elements like illegal surveillance, which can be done in numerous amount of ways in today's world. There's psychological aspects to it. There's things like coordinated stalking. There's a whole multitude of things. So it's used as an umbrella term. And I consider myself a victim of organized harassment, which is maybe an older term before Nils Melzer came up with this term. And I consider organized harassment to have a mixture of a classical playbook that's been around for 70, 80 years of harassment techniques mixed with more modern ones, which include some under the cyber torture umbrella. So that's it in a nutshell.
So when you say organized harassment, like what exactly do you mean? Okay, so you say that there's a playbook going back 70, 80 years. Do you want to lay out maybe perhaps what some of the tactics involved in that would have been? And maybe, we'll start with that.
So first, I'll start with historical versions of it. So now organized harassment, again, it's sort of a general term. It could go back, who knows how far back. Some people say there might have been ancient Roman versions, which there probably was, but some historical rooted versions are the most famous one is COINTELPRO, which is a program that was set up by the FBI, and it was systematic harassment of selected targets Most of the targets were fairly famous or at least influential, or they had a specific reason for going after. Um, some of the names who were in this program are out there, and you can read about it. I believe John Lennon was part of COINTELPRO at a point. And COINTELPRO, some of the tactics involved were smear campaigns against the people, spreading rumors about them, generally trying to make their life more difficult. They did lots of black bag jobs, which is when you break into someone's home, perhaps steal a few things that could be related to their identity. Like you could get their social insurance number, you can steal things like that, and also kind of psychologically disturb them by letting you know that someone was there, perhaps by moving things around or slightly damaging something, just leaving them a sign that someone was there. So COINTELPRO, that was one version of organized harassment. Another version was in East Germany called Zersetzung. And this was an even more advanced version of something like COINTELPRO. And it included the black bag jobs. It included smear campaigns, but it also included coordinated stalking. That's multiple individuals, perhaps complete strangers that will follow you around, kind of let you know that you're being watched and followed on a street level, as well as others. So those are two very well-known and well-studied versions of complex organized harassment. And of course, there's other versions. There's what's a term called fair game, which is a version of organized harassment used to get revenge against people. That's related to Scientology. And there's another version referred to the white glove treatment. And there's other organizations with some power that are able to do these systematic harassment campaigns against people.
So why would the CIA or any government choose to use these techniques to intimidate people or to try and, I don't know, coerce them into doing something? Why would they choose this as opposed to, I don't know, more or perhaps less subtle means of trying to, you know, mess with their head or attempt to get them to be quiet about something or stop protesting or speaking out about something? Like, why would this be the chosen method in order to, you know, oppose people, or essentially?
Well, historically speaking, when we knew, for example, like it's a fact that the FBI did these types of things in the past. Mm-hmm. It's an effective way to derail their life, and in many cases, it can be done more or less without the individual knowing exactly what is behind it. So it can be very difficult to get help in such a situation. It's covert harassment is what it is. And so the FBI did use it effectively against targets that they just wanted to either slow down, get more information from. In some cases, the FBI did even murder people. I think Fred Hampton was the name of one of the people that the FBI did murder. That's the most extreme case, but it's for power and control, and it's one of the effective tools that they have, and it's not as extreme as an assassination because they can't go around assassinating every single people, although they were related to the program in some cases. But it's a means to have power and control and to silence your enemies or slow them down. So that's the reason why the FBI did it. That's the reason why the Stasi state did it in East Germany, because you could eliminate someone. It's a form of psychological warfare, just low intensity psychological warfare to silently eliminate someone. So that's the historical reasons for those versions of organized harassment.
I mean, that definitely makes sense. If you were to be running if I was to have my own country and you're in charge and you go, okay, we need to try and maybe get these people discredited, or we want to send them a message that we don't like what they're doing, but we don't want them to explicitly know who it is that's doing it or exactly what it is that's being done. Or like you said, even if there's nothing happening, it feels like maybe there's nothing happening, or you might just be losing your mind. Like that's probably one of the most effective ways to get people to break. Like you don't have to ruin, like to completely take them out in order to silence them. You just need to break them psychologically, and which is probably a lot easier than discrediting someone's ideas. So when did you first come across the term? Was it like when you said you'd been a victim yourself, and I want to get onto your own experience, but when did you first come across cyber torture as like an idea or a term? Was it only when you began experiencing harassment, or were you sort of familiar with the term and the idea beforehand?
I had very little knowledge about most of these topics, but I became a victim of organized harassment myself. So cyber torture is the term being held up by Nils Melzer, and he has kind of his own game plan for that. And it also is talking about stuff in the future. I've talked so far about organized harassment of the past. Well, these same programs, the COINTEL program, they said, oh, we don't do that anymore. But I don't believe that for 1 second. And they are, whether it's the FBI or anyone else, more sophisticated versions of these programs are coming out. It's getting more and more advanced to the point where it's not even so much discrediting someone, playing with their mind. As we'll talk to later, the next frontier of warfare in general and control is to get directly inside the brain, to effectively hack your brain. Now, we can talk a little bit about that later and the extent to which that is possible now and what may be possible in the future. But that's kind of the next frontier. So there's lots and lots of reasons why powerful entities would want to invest a lot of time and energy into perfecting these forms of harassment. And indeed, they're getting more and more covert in nature. And that's something that people will have to really pay attention to. So that's the cyber torture aspect. So I first found out about it. I realized I had some type of systematic harassment against me. I started researching things. I wasn't exactly sure. I knew some of the perpetrators personally against it, and I knew that from direct conversations from them, from direct threats they gave to me. Things like, we can ruin your life if we want to. It's going to be really hard for you to restart your life after this, and there's a lot of money involved in it. These were direct, more or less, quotes from perpetrators who I uncovered. So as soon as I heard those things, I said, oh my God, there's something going on. And as more things happened, I realized this is a type of organized harassment. And so that led me to trying to figure out what it was, what the nature of it was. And so that I had so-called black bag jobs done against me on multiple occasions. And at this point, I still didn't know a whole bunch about organized harassment, but you kind of knew what it was, kind of a psychological game. And I reported it to lawyers, my parents, to health officials, and I started reporting these symptoms of organized harassment before I even knew what it was. So that's kind of how I got the ball rolling, and so I've obviously uncovered a lot since then.
Okay, so do you want to talk a little bit about your experience then? So you talked a little bit about it there, and also do you want to tell me what a black bag job is?
Yes, sorry. That's when that was one of the COINTELPRO techniques that is still done today. And a black bag job is simply going into your house or the place that you live. They might steal a few petty things, like not super valuable things, not something the police would necessarily want to get involved in. They wouldn't steal a diamond ring or something like that, but they'll steal some minor things. They'll maybe shift a few things around in your house, let you know they were there. In the olden days, they might look for like your birth certificate, your SIN, but I think that's more old-fashioned style. They can get those things other ways now. And in my case, they even like it was a psychological warfare technique. They sent me messages through these black bag jobs. They would take a bag and fill it full of items that I knew wasn't there. And I came across this bag, and I can't describe exactly. It was the context was related just to me and my situation, but they left things in my apartment that I knew why they left those particular objects. It was to send me a message. They weren't there beforehand. There was no possible way. And so that's a black bag job. It's a legal entry into your place to gaslight you, to scare you, to intimidate you, perhaps gather information. And I knew these were happening. It happened to me maybe 4 times. I came back and there was an obvious black bag job. They would even drop cigarette butts around my house. And I said, I know that wasn't there for sure. Like someone was here, and they let you do it. But in a way that there's deniability. So if you go to the police and I say, oh, someone was in my house and there's cigarette butts on the floor and they left this strange bag full of items that kind of had this meaning, that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to the police officer. And so it's kind of like a psychological warfare technique. And it was done in COINTELPRO. It was done in Zersetzung. And it's done in modern organized harassment, reported by thousands of other victims.
I mean, what you're describing actually, it reminds me of some of the things I've heard about happening to Bob Lazar, who is someone who claimed to have worked for the US government in some military bases relating to Area 51. And he says that, yeah, it's a really hilarious, but his story is really weird because he's experiencing some of the same things that you're saying. He's coming back and maybe he'd wake up in the morning and he'd go outside and his car doors would be sitting open, or really tiny things that like was slowly just really fuck with your head. So you said people came into the apartment and they actually like left like a bag just of items as some sort of message to you that they were that
Yes, I wish I could explain like what exactly was inside the bag. Yeah. But this is kind of it's kind of an online, like this is a real ongoing issue for me. There's legal elements. Yeah. There's people I don't want to mess with. So I can't exactly, maybe one day I'll write a book about this or something, but I could, like, it was objects that there was no possibility I just left behind there, and they had a specific meaning, like a message, and the message was like, we we can ruin your life. We're watching you. Like, this is to put fear in you. And so it was a very menacing thing. And my blood froze, like, when I uncovered this. I was like, oh my God. And that was when I was starting to really realize I was in, like I told you, I received some of those threats earlier, and I took them very seriously. But I said, this might be a bit of a bluff. What do you mean there's a whole bunch of money behind this, or you can ruin my life? I didn't know how to interpret those things. And then when these events started to happen, I said, oh my gosh, this is really serious business. And also, these people know what they're doing. They're good. They're able to pull off pretty impressive covert harassments. And so that was one of them, and one of the ones that I really caught on early, that I knew I was in a tough situation.
So where did it start? What was the first time that you thought, well, that's a bit odd, or something happened, or you were aware that you were a victim of something?
So this is an excellent question. And it's a little bit hard to describe, but I'll do it. Basically, I was targeted for years before I was aware of it, which is not uncommon from what other people said. Now, this doesn't mean I was harassed all the time. This doesn't mean I saw coordinated stalking or black bag jobs all the time, but I could kind of reconstruct the timeline for how this unfolded to some degree. I know for sure some of this began in 2013. And one of the earliest incidents, I have to be a bit careful about talking about this, but I was put on a watch list for an incredibly petty crime, like quote unquote crime. It was a very small misdemeanor that kind of happened in an orchestrated fashion that seemed very odd to me, and I do believe this was done not as a coincidence. But a police officer came up to me, and he said, like, yeah, we know about this real basic crime. It's not even a crime in Canada anymore, and he put me on a watch list. He said, you're going to be put on a secret watch list. It won't show up if you go to the border or something like that, but we're putting you on this watch list. So I really wish I called a lawyer at the time, and I refused to give my information for the watch list. These police did a few other sketchy things. I think the whole thing, it seemed to me like really sloppy police work. I'm not going to say exactly what they did, but they didn't do things exactly by the book. It was really not a major crime or anything like that. Like I said, it's not even a crime in Canada anymore. And I think this whole setup was orchestrated. So that might have been the first seed. And in these more sophisticated organized harassment campaigns, they can spend some time to get started, to get a profile on you, to research you, to know where they can attack you, find out what your weaknesses are, find out what skeletons you have in your closet, find anything like that. So that was the first trace I noticed of something odd going on. And there was more to that story, but I'm going to leave it there. I can move on a bit. And then I moved across the country to the other side of the country. And I didn't notice anything unusual for like a year or two. But then in retrospect, I started to realize that people were being planted into my life for nefarious reasons. And So this was happening for 2 or 3 years. And at the time, I just thought, oh, these are just jerks, or you just have bumps in the road in life. But what happened is I started to have a few bad experiences with people in my job, related to my social circle, could be roommates, things like that, who were acting very, very bizarrely. And finally, it was when I confronted one of them. This wasn't until 2019. Um, when I confronted one of them, they responded with these direct threats, with this notion that there's like more going on than you realize. Uh, Sorry, I'm speaking very carefully because I don't want to implicate people.
Oh, that's okay.
But uh, um, what basically happened was it wasn't until 2019 when I really confronted one of these people who I felt was damaging my life. I thought they were gaslighting me. I believed that they were doing another very unethical thing against me that I can't bring up. Um, and I confronted them. And that's when like I said, this is way too over the top. And as soon as I uncovered this, I realized that this person was part of a plot, that this was not an accident, that all of these other people that I was involved in uh, actually knew each other. And they didn't tell me that they knew each other. And then I realized that there was a bit of a web, a bit of a system of people gaslighting me, trying to derail my life. And that was something that took me a while to uncover, and I may have never uncovered that. It would have been very possible that I would have never uncovered that there was a connection between these people who were in on it. And That again is another technique going back to previous forms of organized harassment. It was especially notable in the Stasi state, where 1 in 30 civilians was a spy and a provocateur for the system. Now, I don't think anything to that. I don't think 1 in 30 U.S. citizens are involved in organized harassment. Like in East Germany, I don't think that at all. But they will
I don't know, man.
tailor.
Check your Twitter feed.
Yeah, actually, maybe not. But they will certainly curate and tailor a system. They'll set it up against you. And in my case, I know with 100% certainty there was about 5 or 6 people in on it. They basically admitted it as much. And I suspect another maybe 3 or 4 were in on it as well. Different levels. But all these experiences that I'm describing are common to other victims today. And those were the most damaging is if you can get someone to gaslight you at work, if you can get someone close to them, get you to gaslight them all the time, the effects can be devastating, just devastating. And so that was how I first started to catch on to that, was the confronting this one guy. And then what escalated was I went to the police. I went to the police about these threats that I received. And the police said, gather as much evidence. Like, we think you could have some evidence in this case to defend yourself. And I did gather some evidence. And they said, we believe your story, but there's only so much we can do. And after going to the police, that is when the the major harassment started. As soon as I went to the police, right after that, that's when like the full playbook came out. That's when the coordinated stalking started. That's when the black bag job started. That's when I met a few other people planted. Even someone I went to for help was planted on me. And I said, oh my goodness, this is, I had no idea that I uncovered something this deep. Uh, and so it was kind of a bit of a going down a rabbit hole to reconstruct the full events of what happened before I knew and after.
Okay. The biggest question I have is kind of why you? You know yeah.
Yes. So this is the number one question for contemporary victims of organized harassment. We talked a little bit about the historical versions. Now we're going to talk about the contemporary versions. This is what thousands of people worldwide complain of these issues. And the number one question is, why would it happen? Like the COINTELPRO is explained, we know why they went after John Lennon because he was famous and influential. Why are they going after you? So there's multiple answers to this question.
Okay.
And it's a bit frightening. And some of these are theoretical. So in my case, I have two main theories about why they went after me, why I was flagged. But before I talk about mine, I'm gonna talk about other people's.
Okay.
So modern organized harassment, it's believed that it's happening for multiple reasons. It can be used to get revenge against someone for petty reasons. It can be used for nefarious, illegal reasons, including perverted reasons, sexual assault, things along those lines. And another theory is that it's mostly done for illegal experimentation and the expanding of these systems of control. So instead of doing these systems of control against one person, like a famous person, it seems that they want to be able to control people's lives on a wider scale. So to unpack this all a bit more, I'll give you an example of each of these cases. There's a journalist in New Zealand. Her name is Susie Dawson.
Okay.
And she covered WikiLeaks. She was all into the Julian Assange mistreatment. And she became a victim of organized harassment. She had to escape the country she was in. She moved and she had a vicious campaign against her. In that case, it was pretty clearly because she was a journalist. They wanted to silence her. They didn't want to talk her. They didn't want any talk about the WikiLeaks. So that was one like political motive. Sometimes they can be done for just like a petty reason. I'll give you two of those examples. There was many cases where someone breaks up with their husband or they reject a lover and then they find themselves in an organized harassment campaign. That includes, there was a well-covered version of this that happened in Canada, in Calgary, where a woman broke up with her husband and he started a systematic organized harassment campaign that he funded himself against her. But this included paying off the police. It included paying off private investigators. And all of this was proven in court, including that the police were in on this stalking campaign. And so that one ended. But the third one is the biggest and the biggest explanation. And that's that it's done as a system, for one, that the military industrial complex could get plenty of opportunity to practice their techniques, get use out of their technologies, get work for people who do these kinds of nefarious activities. Um, and there's quite a scientific reason behind that. And that is that it's almost a combination of COINTELPRO and MK Ultra done almost at the same time. So while they have a person under systemic organized harassment, it's an opportunity at which they can use all of the advanced technologies and get a real world example for which they can do that from. So that's the most complicated one. That one is something that I would try to leave to an expert to explain that one.
Okay.
So if someone wants to learn about the usage of people as guinea pigs through organized harassment, they should look at Dr. John Hall or Dr. Robert Duncan. And Dr. John Hall is a professional who's spoken with over 5,000 targeted individuals, is what they identify as. And he explains it as they're using advanced neurotechnology and using these people as guinea pigs. And they can discredit them. No one will believe them. And instead of taking the MK Ultra type experiment that used to be done in mental hospitals, now they can just do it in your home, and they can watch you 24/7. They can use it as a guinea pig testing lab, and the types of technologies that we're talking about here are the frontier of neuro warfare. And the CIA, I forget the name of the man at the CIA, but he said, before we engage in neuro warfare with our enemies, we're going to test it on our own population. He actually said that publicly. I think he was fired for it. But that is another branch of why organized harassment can occur. And then the final branch is for kind of sexual perverted reasons, and that is called psychoporn. And that is something that the UN did bring up earlier. They said that some of these victims of organized harassment are broadcast on the dark web, and as a kind of psychoporn, and people will pay very high prices to watch someone get systematically harassed. They could sneak cameras into their home, watch them in sexual moments, and they would get pleasure from that, and also just seeing them effectively be tortured and lose their mind kind of on a live stream. And there is some evidence for that, and apparently these dark web channels are another way to monetize it. So there's a whole bunch of reasons to explain why regular people could go under organized harassment. In my own case, I haven't fully constructed why I was chosen, but they kind of let me know a few cases of they for a while, and with some of my perpetrators, we spoke in depth about kind of projects I wanted to do, which were about indigenous activism. So I'm very interested in Canada and its Native American history. And I had big plans to come out with like a YouTube channel on this subject, the ancient history of Canada and the subsequent genocide of Native American people. That was a topic I was very interested in, and they let me know they don't want me to continue doing that. So that's a kind of political motive. But I'm not sure. And uh, some of these things, I can report that they're happening, but I don't confess that I know like the entire theory behind this whole system. But something that's being talked about quite extensively at the UN is that ultimately, this might be my case, I don't know, is that some of this is because they need victims to which they can study in depth, brain map them, and use that for artificial intelligence technology. So, one theory behind the rise in all of this organized harassment is that it's part of a kind of Manhattan project for neural warfare, which is the future of what warfare is going to be. These advanced technologies, including brain computer interface, remote neural monitoring, and other types of really out there stuff that is kind of on the frontier of science. So, so, so that's kind of like the broad idea. It seems to be a multifaceted system that you can do different things for different reasons, and even get two things done at once. Maybe you dislike someone for a petty reason, harass them, and then you can subsidize it by broadcasting it on the dark web or doing illegal experimentation, including very high tech stuff. So that's kind of the picture that we see of the rise of these types of assault.
Wow. Okay, that is. There's. Yeah.
I know. I just dropped so
Yeah.
much. I dropped
Yeah.
so much.
No, it's all right, man. I like it. You just there was a lot of knowledge bombs raining down there. I'm not even sure where to begin. Like maybe we can talk a little bit about the way what you said there, that there's theories that this may be a form of Manhattan Project for neural warfare.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so you said that this is being discussed at the UN, that the UN, like in the UN, that they're discussing openly that governments are doing this to people, or intelligence agencies are doing it to people, and they're kind of recognizing that it's a thing and basically accepting that happens. Like is that what you're telling me?
Well, about the UN, Nils Melzer did his presentation yesterday,
Yes.
that many people were waiting for. He didn't really go into any types of torture specifically. He talked about two main things. He did mention psychological warfare quite a few times, and that's a key component to this whole thing, because it's believed that Julian Assange experienced psychological torture. And most of cyber torture is related to psychological torture. That includes coordinated stalking, aka known in slang as gang stalking. That's psychological warfare. Black bag jobs, psychological warfare. Doing this as a campaign, altogether, that is psychological warfare. And this is a new way that a new system of control is to destroy someone psychologically in almost a no-touch way, so that you can nefariously control or destroy someone's life and make it seem like it was just self-destruction or that nothing else was involved. So this is a new technique to harm people and control people, and it's the future of warfare. Even Vladimir Putin said a few years ago, he said, the future is neural warfare, like these advanced, whoever controls these things will control the mind. And so this is the kind of MK Ultra side to modern organized harassment. Now, is the UN openly talking about this as a Manhattan Project? I haven't seen that.
Oh no, I don't mean that they're
UN.
talking.
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
I don't think they're
yeah.
being that explicit.
Yeah.
It's more, it's like they're the UN are opening it, or like happy to hold a discussion in which they discuss that governments or intelligence agencies may be committing these crimes, or they know that they are committing these crimes against their own populations. Like, would that be accurate?
The only sign I saw that from the UN was they did say that cyber torture is committed by government, corporate, and criminal entities.
Okay.
And that makes sense to me in explaining why organized harassment happens, at least the modern forms, because I think all three of those entities get involved in it. If you get in trouble with there was an example where eBay started a organized harassment campaign against a blogger who wrote something negative about eBay. It was as simple as that, and they tried to systematically ruin their life. It was a vicious campaign. They would do things like ordering pornography under his name, but sending it to all of his neighbors on the block.
What?
They sent like dead animals and live spiders to his door. This is because someone wrote something bad about eBay, and they were high like executives at eBay that were involved in this, and it was the most petty thing you can imagine. I would say, eBay, why don't you just maybe take the criticism that this blogger wrote about you and try and fix your company, or respond to the blogger in a humane way? But no, they just tried to systematically destroy these people. This is all written up, but that's an example of private organized harassment that you can trace exactly who funded it, and it was all figured out, and it went to jail, or it went to court, and it was properly prosecuted.
Yeah, like when you're talking about MK Ultra as well, it makes it all seem very much more real, because there's always going to be like people being like, oh, this is definitely just like conspiracy theorists talking rubbish like they did in the 60s. But then MK Ultra is real. Like, it happened. Like, it's the documents have all been declassified. There's been, I don't know how many documentaries made, and how many like different stories have been told about the shocking torture of US and Canadian citizens. Basically, I think to say that this is ridiculous, that this could happen, as I'm sure some people will, is probably quite naive. And the Assange case is just the tip of the iceberg, I think, really.
Yes. And a good introductory point, because I know what I'm saying, like, even if I was listening to this myself, I would be very skeptical of what I'm saying. Not necessarily dismiss it, but it is like stuff that you're not going to take easily. But I'll make a few points to that. First of all, I talked about East Germany earlier. There was some 10,000 victims of this coordinated harassment. No one believed them at the time. They were considered delusional, and no one thought it was a real thing. That's until the system fell, the documents came out, and it was proven that all of this was reality. So that happens to a lot of victims of organized harassment today, is people just doubt them. They say they can't make sense of it, so they think it's not real. And that's another point that Nils Melzer did speak about in his presentation. He said that there's a notion of people not torture goes on because people psychologically just don't want to believe it's real. That people kind of delude themselves to thinking that these types of things aren't going on, just even from a psychological point, because we tend to think we don't tend to always think the worst. But all of these things are historically rooted. And furthermore, in Canada, they had some of the worst MK Ultra tests. These were people who went to a respectable mental clinic at McGill University. They had minor depression, minor mental health issues. Dr. Ewan Cameron took these people in and tortured them for experimentation. He exposed them to psychic driving, which was forcing someone to listen to the same sentence over and over again for like 3 weeks. And the result was people forgot how to speak. They forgot how to feed themselves. They became vegetables. This is all proven. And furthermore, it's, even though there's tons of evidence about it, there's documentaries about it, some of these victims are still under gag orders and feel that it's still being tried. They're trying to keep it under the carpet still. And there's a great podcast series called Brainwashed that was just done recently, going over all of these experiments in Canada I just described. And the journalist behind it, she says, yes, MK Ultra, this was the conspiracy theory that was real. And also she says, and these types of experimentation are still going on.
She openly says that on the documentary or on the podcast.
Yeah, and she said they're still going on. She doesn't say how, but one of the big theories is that people who are undergoing organized harassment of some type are actually in kind of like an invisible laboratory for testing, and you might not even be aware of what the testing is. But in some cases, there's other cases where people have described all kinds of strange effects. So to try and link things, I'll go on to the Julian Assange case, which Nils Melzer was quick on. And so we believe that that's a case of psychological torture, systematic psychological torture. It's fascist in nature. Whether or not you think he's a criminal, you're supposed to treat criminals with dignity. We don't make them experience cruel and unusual punishment. But it's believed that that's happening. And a key, now this is going to sound out there to some people, but I'll explain it, and people can make up their own minds. Julian Assange started to experience voices in his head and music in his head. He started to self-report that. Many people are concerned that that is actually an advanced technology being used against Assange, which is called voice to skull. And voice to skull is a microwave technology where you can wirelessly put voices, music, sounds into a person's head. Now, this sounds crazy. It sounds like science fiction.
Yeah.
But if you look it up, in 1961, there was a test where they managed to put sounds wirelessly into a deaf man's head, where a deaf man, along with people who could hear ordinarily, they could do this basic technology as far back as 1961. Today, there are thousands of people. And now it looks just like schizophrenia. That's a classic case of schizophrenia. But people say also you don't get schizophrenia instantly when you're 55 years old or whatever Julian Assange is. And it is, I believe Nils Melzer knows about this technology. He for sure will not say it openly, especially in the Assange case. I can't say I know for sure this is, in fact, voice to skull technology, but it would be very much in the playbook. And I have spoken to victims personally of voice to skull. At first, I was super skeptical. I said, I don't really believe this. But I've spoken to victims my age, multiple ones, and I said, "Oh, our harassment is kind of similar, except you say you get voice to skull. I don't get any voice to skull, but I heard these people tell their stories, and I believe them. And there is a science. It's not science fiction. It is doable, and people have." Demonstrated how it can be possible. Dr. Nick Begich explored that quite a bit. Same with Dr. Robert Duncan, who's a former DARPA, CIA, DoD scientist. He talked about that technology. And he said the computer, the brain is not a mystical object that operates outside of the physical world. It's kind of like a computer that is in the real world, and it can be interacted with. You can beam things into it. And a big, there was even a little bit of mainstream coverage of the voice to skull technology, where a man complained about it in China, and they did tests on him. They scanned his brain. It had no sign of any damage to his brain, or his brain was operating fine. And he says he's continuously being attacked by this voice to skull technology, which is very similar. It's kind of like the ability to do psychic driving, except from a distance.
Is this the same case as is this the American diplomat that was experiencing these, who claimed to have been a victim of some sort of like sonic attack in China? I read there was a piece on the BBC where they were doing coverage of it, and they were announcing that they were prescribing, if you hear these weird sounds or sort of noises in your head, like a ringing, or there was a couple of other ones, they were advising you to immediately vacate the area and get out of wherever you are. Immediately go away from wherever you are and try and get as far away from the where it seems to be the source of the noise. So like the BBC were openly saying that this was happening and telling people how to deal with it, basically. So I mean, I think there's at least there's at least like mainstream coverage in terms of that. Like they're all, and Mike Pompeo, I believe, went in front of a congressional committee. I'm not sure which one, I can't remember, but he was talking about either this case or a similar case where there had been some sort of sonic attack on a US soldier or diplomat as well. So it's not like this is completely reserved for the dark forums of Reddit, where people are claiming these things are happening. It's very much out there in the mainstream press when you really look for it.
Yes. And I was quite skeptical. The best coverage, some of these are different forms of technology, but if someone wants to learn about the future of control, the future of both controlling populations, the future of warfare, it's neuro warfare, and there is a scientist called Dr. James Giordano. And he has many, many lectures where he's just talking about, like, look, guns, bullets, and bombs are old school. Warfare is going direct to the brain, and it's now a whole bunch of technologies that you can't even see coming towards you. And so the theory is, well, you have to have some idea of what these dangerous weapons are going to do. They have a whole arsenal of them, and some of these weapons we have no idea what they are, because no one knows what the most secret advanced military technology is. But there is a underground arms race for this. Like China is interested in it, Russia is interested in it, United States is interested in it. They have to develop these weapons that can either kill you in some covert way, like it could give you a heart attack out of nowhere. It could be hidden as some type of natural cause, but they can replicate it electronically. There was I think the most well publicized case was the Havana. They call it the Havana syndrome because of the directed energy weapons attacks in the embassy in Havana. That was the most famous one. But the idea is that some of these victims of organized harassment have become guinea pigs for whichever weaponry or system of control they want to try against them. And indeed, I've talked to other victims who have like burns on their body from directed energy weapons, or psychological trauma from the voice to skull, which is just like almost like a radio being played in your head.
Yeah, like I mean, so I had to do a little research on psychological warfare when I was writing my book, because I was talking a lot about just how social media can be used in trying to basically use psychological warfare techniques against like an entire population by just like subtly nudging them with propaganda or trolling.
Oh yeah,
was used by the Russians by the Internet Research Agency, and I've came across this piece where in 2015 the British Army actually announced that they were like forming an entire like brigade, the 77th Brigade, I think it was, in order to, it was going to be their modern psychological warfare division, essentially. So, you know, this is something that the governments are 100% interested in. But like the things like the directed energy weapons and the, you know, sonic weapons genuinely would sound completely insane to people when you talk about it. But I mean, if they're standing up in the UN and talking about this as a problem, then there's got to be, you know, there's no smoke without fire. And Nils Melzer actually said something really interesting in his address yesterday, and he kept mentioning this idea that society is willfully ignoring this. Like, we're aware that it's happening, yes, and we're sort of ignoring it. And I guess it's when you have so many victims coming forwards and nothing's being really discussed about it. Do you think there's things like this that we just kind of ignore and accept as a part and parcel of society? Is that why we're ignoring it?
Well, I think now to answer your question, Bill Binney was the former technical director of the NSA in the United States. He designed the surveillance system called Thin Thread, which was supposed to monitor all activity. So this guy was like one of the most influential people in American American intelligence community. He has come out as a whistleblower, and he's saying the NSA wants complete population control. They want to control people 100%. That's how he says it. Now, Bill Binney is also an activist for victims of directed energy weapons attacks. He believes he himself is a victim, and he's done a survey of all these people. So the idea is, I think the public is already under systems of control. I mean, we all are. Like, propaganda is real. What you see on the mainstream media is going to be controlled, and you're not going to see too much Like CNN will be the last person to cover to cover some of these things. They hardly talk about the fact that Assange is supposed to be a citizen of the free world, even if they identify him as a criminal. He's being tortured, and that's hardly covered. So we are already under mind control. It's just there's soft mind control. That's media. Your internet is filtered to yourself. Like what you see on your Facebook is filtered kind of for your interests. It can keep you in your own little bubble in a way. And so I think the systems of control, they go back a long time, but now they're getting more immediate and more intense. And I think for total population control, you need a bunch of people who aren't too concerned about these things, and everything seems to be fine in my world. The other element is it's a known fact that psyops are committed against the public. The CIA is involved in campaigns of control, or they just manage things. They have their fingers in things, and and we don't know the full extent, but that is real thing. And I think there's efforts to confuse the public right now, because we live in extremely volatile times.
Yeah,
when
you can say that.
I don't blame anyone at all if they hear what I'm saying today and they say, you know what, this guy is just another conspiracy guy, like the QAnon guy, or the like, this is really easy to sweep under the carpet in that environment where everything is crazy. And it's just such an insane time. And it's weird because we're in a time when like conspiracy theory and reality are kind of meeting, but kind of bouncing off each other. Like, I understand if someone doesn't, like, I don't believe in, I'm not a QAnon follower, but there's a kernel of truth to it, in that there is like massive pedophile rings. Like, that's true.
That's one of the biggest problems, is that they have like a small point, like actually not even a small point. The fact that like Jeffrey Epstein was connected with a whole bunch of powerful people is like, should be investigated. Like, that's not a crazy thing to say. And yet like they're just, you're just right. They get pictured as, okay, these are conspiracy theorists, and therefore it's all crazy. And whereas, quite often there's something to be learned somewhere, or someone has got a kernel of truth somewhere that something's not right. Especially when you get things that really, are so all encompassing as theories like that. But yeah, it's a weird time to live in, where we're kind of, you've got that collision. I saw something that actually on talk radio in the UK that was just, it was a shockingly, I can't even understand what their point was. It was like a 10-minute segment where they got like a psychologist on to discuss why all conspiracy theories are bullshit. And I was just like, what do you mean? Like that?
That's the biggest conspiracy theory of all.
He was like, these people are just crazy, and obviously nothing is ever going on. And I was like, you're literally just like proving their point here, like just by dismissing. It's like, no, the official explanation is always the most rational one. And
some of this is set up by design, I think, as well. It's often said that the term conspiracy theory was actually invented by the CIA. I don't know if that's true or not, but it makes a lot of sense, because they do plot conspiracies. They do evil things, and these agencies are corrupt. None of this is like, this is something the whole public can agree with. Also, these techniques of harassment, these techniques of experimentation, they're well documented. They're all real, and we're naive if we think they've all ended. If anything, I think some of this experimentation, they can try and justify, like, yeah, that is kind of an evil thing to ruin this person's life by zapping them with these weapons just to see what happens. But we have to do it because if we don't do it, China will do it, and then they will rule the world when they have more advanced equipment than us. Something like that might be going behind the scenes. But also with corruption, it can get super nefarious. And another example is there's the classic case of the tinfoil hat. And the tinfoil hat is like the most, like, clearly, like, no one with self-respect wants to believe in a tinfoil hat theory. That's the most craziest one. That's the guy in the movie who thinks the aliens are beaming things into his skull. Well, guess what? The CIA and other agencies like that are experimenting with technologies where they do beam things into your skull. And I don't think the tinfoil hat is actually going to help you in any way. But that image of that being impossible needs to be wiped out, because we're in 2020. Tech is out of this world. Your brain is a computer that can be hacked like anything else. And now brain hacking isn't super advanced to the point where you could do anything like it's the mind control playbook is quite vast, but they're still in development. But that's the direction where things are going. And I think the public just has to get a sense that, no, like, this neural warfare, this stuff is here, and it can be used for population control. And even it's already showing up. There was the whistleblower in the United States who pointed out directed energy weapons. They considered using them against protesters in the United States. That was a story covered by mainstream media. Like, that is, yes, that was a recent story. You could look it up. I think even like the New York Times or Washington Post covered it. And a whistleblower said the government considered using directed energy weapons against protesters. So this stuff is here. This is, if people... if anyone is skeptical of this podcast so far, maybe I don't have everything 100% right, but at least follow some of these trails. And this stuff is all here. It is here. And we have to be on guard for it. There was an interesting, again, I bring up these old experiments to show that this stuff has been like planned for a long time. Again, in the 60s, Dr. Jose Delgado did an experiment where they took a bull and they had to put like antennae into the brain of the bull. So there was an electric current straight to the brain. And from a distance, they could get this bull, they could get it worked up in a rage and then get it to calm down instantly in like half a second. They could change its emotion in like half a second wirelessly with electronics. He was able to do that later again with monkeys, where they didn't even have to put antenna in the brain. They could change the mood of monkeys electronically using just, pretty intense equipment. But this is the 60s, 70s, 80s. This stuff... I'm certain people have reported about it, that you can electronically change humans' moods wirelessly, even on a crowd level. Like that is some insane technology. And if it isn't ready to go right now, it's just around the corner. And these are things that we're entering a new world where we can't be caught off guard if these systems of control, electronic control, are out there and people are unprepared for them. That's very dangerous.
Yeah, just for posterity, all the stuff we've talked about, I will put links to in the resources in the description, just so in
Yes.
case anyone's thinking, no, these guys are talking rubbish. The heat ray. Sorry, I've just looked up the thing you talked about. So the military police sought a heat ray weapon deemed unsuitable for war use to use on the protesters in Washington D.C. It's called an active denial system, or ADS. And this is a Slate article with so yeah, this isn't some, again, forum comment that we're talking about.
No.
Just to sort of move towards wrapping up here, like where is this going, do you think, and sort of how would one try to do anything to fight back against it if you were disgusted by what you've learned here today?
This is the best question you could have asked. This is why I'm coming forward. By the way, why I'm speaking publicly about this. I don't think it's beneficial to my own status. Whatever my status of organized harassment is, mine seemed to be. I know for sure the COINTELPRO side was real. I don't know. In my case, if I'm being MK Ultra, I'm not aware of it, but I'm doing this because we're going down a dark road here that is more Orwellian than Orwell can imagine. If you want to get another sense of technologies that I believe might be tested on people, again, you can look this up if it doesn't sound real. But another technology is now you can be able to electronically see through another person's eyes, believe that or not. The version they have is not wireless, that was published. You can look it up, or I'll send you the link afterwards if you can't find it. And they have the pictures of it and everything, but you can put a wire in someone's brain and then you can see through their eyes, type of thing. And it's also believed that this might be able to be done wirelessly as well. These are all gifts for a police state, which we are, like, it's already known we're in a surveillance state. The next step is to surveil your own body, even your mind, your brain. So we have to be on guard for these things. We need things like a firewall for the brain. To protect yourself from hacking. Now, I think unless you're one of these obscure experiments, that's probably not happening too much right now. But it's a very dangerous road to go down. So not being caught off guard about the powers of technology, and just informing yourself. And paying attention to all these developments, all happening at the same time. There's the crazy weapons. There's artificial intelligence is getting more crazy. All of these things we have to keep an eye on. Another thing is police and law enforcement have to be prepared for these types of organized harassments. I didn't get to speak very much about the coordinated stalking, aka gang stalking, even though I don't really like that word. That is a real thing, and there's lots of people trying to explain it away by mental illness. I've seen it with my own eyes, and there's also there's way too many victims with too much consistency for it to be explained by a delusion. It would be like the most consistent mass delusion I've ever heard of, like 20,000 or more people coming forward with all of these similar events. It can't be explained away that way. But if you're just the public, I think following these issues, I recommend looking up the James Giordano video to get a little 101 about where we're headed for neural weapons and things like that. And he's a DARPA guy. He's telling you what the future of warfare is going to be, and the public has to be aware of that. And And we have to fight back against systems of control, which I think is another key element of this whole thing. Is if you can silence someone by just making it look like that person is going crazy when really you're playing using psychological warfare tactics against them, we can't allow that to happen. We have to be able to identify that and protect people from it. And simple ways of that, we have to refuse this mass surveillance that was proven to be illegal. Edward Snowden's his leaks showed to the world that this stuff is illegal, but that doesn't mean it all comes crumbling down instantly. So we have to fight against the police state, which we are headed for, if not already in. I would say we're already well in that. So preparing against those things and speaking out about it. People protest about Black Lives Matter, which I think, that's like, it was nice to see that people went out and tried to take the democratic approach and spoke for what they wanted. But we can speak about other things as well. We don't want to live in a police state. We don't want to live like Canada considers itself a respectable country, yet there's still gag orders for people who were MK Ultra experiments. Yeah. I refuse that. I criticized the Trudeau government immensely for that. I think that we should take these people and say, this will never happen in our society again. But no, they're not doing anything like that. So you can go as far down the rabbit hole as you want to. I have a background in philosophy. I don't expect people to just instantly believe everything I say. But I didn't believe some of the things I said until going further down. But at least pay attention to these things and realize that there are great powers trying to control things, and they will use whatever methods that they deem fit. And there's kind of a technological race going on right now, and we're all going to have to really be prepared for that. I guess it begins with knowledge, knowing, being aware of it. My hope is a few of these technologies get really properly exposed, and we can really like the directed energy weapons have been fully exposed now, especially with those whistleblowers and stuff. And we'll have to. The danger of technology is, as soon as you have a new technology, you have to have something to counteract it. And the way that race is going right now, the destructive weapons are far ahead, and we don't yet have the counter to these technologies, like the firewall for the human brain. That will be a thing eventually, I guarantee you, and other things. So we're entering a scary new world, and I guess just the ultimate cure, just as Nils Melzer said, is just not being lazy with these things, realizing how important they are. And if someone comes forward as a victim of torture, give it a lot of attention, and even if it doesn't make sense to you and you can't explain it in your mind, look further into it, because there could be something going on that is simply just beyond the regular realm of knowledge. So that's kind of how I see it. And it's going to be a crazy ride, because whether we like it or not, we're headed in that direction. It's just happening, and we're heading into a new world.
Yeah, I guess it's difficult to put these kind of things back in the box. The one optimistic thing I would hope is that if the US and any Western nations are concerned that the Chinese and the Russians are building weapons like this, that they will be straight on research in trying to prevent or trying to protect people against it, because if our soldiers could be victims of it, then they need to find defenses. So I would be hopeful that they're also, as much as they're working on the destructive powers, that they will need to be working on the defensive aspect as well. Although maybe that is not as flashy and doesn't get leaked. It's very easy to show how powerful a weapon is and sort of see evidence of that, but it's very difficult to see evidence of things that may defend against it, because if a government has built something to defend against it, or if someone has, and then someone tries it and it doesn't work, then there is no evidence that it ever happened in the first place. So I would be maybe hopeful that governments know how to do it, but the better thing would be if they just didn't do it. That would be much nicer. And
Yeah.
like the UN has outlawed things before that there's rules of engagement on warfare, and there's we sort of all internationally weirdly, or we're fine with war, but we condemn biological warfare. There's things that we have decided as a human race that are beyond even our own quarrels as nations, that we should not subject populations to that. So perhaps at some point we will then come to a similar framework on these kind of weapons. But yeah, so I think that's a nice enough place to leave it. Is there anything you wanna plug just before we finish up here?
Yeah, I would like to say to the general public, I'll say if someone comes forward to you as a victim, listen to them, and even if you don't understand it, there still may be something going on there that's more simple than the most easy explanation, such as, oh, it's just mental illness, something like that. And I will also say to people, I've spoken to many victims out there who have gone through things similar to me, the smear campaigns, coordinated stalking, break-ins, psychological warfare. It's like low intensity psychological warfare. I've even spoken to the victims of the more extreme stuff, like the directed energy weapons, the voice to skull. For all those people, my heart goes out to you. I know what you're going through, and I recommend just trying to reach out to other victims, try and find people going through the same things. Don't delude yourself. I know it can be hard, because psychological torture can flip your mind upside down. Try and regain your ground, and just know that it's worth trying to fight on, so that we can prove some of this nefarious activity is going on multiple levels. So that's my plug.
Okay, well, James, this was a roller coaster.
Oh yeah, it was a tough one to do because it's a crazy topic.
I mean, yeah, someone has to say it. But yeah, thanks very much for doing it, man. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for listening. If you haven't already and you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast and to our mailing list. And don't forget, my book, Brexit, The Establishment Civil War, is now available for pre-order on Amazon. You'll find the link in the description below. Until next time, thanks for listening.